this crew is highly experienced at being flexible. And so I really appreciate your patience and flexibility. So on with a terrific meeting, and I'll turn to Dr. Oxendine to continue our meeting. Dr. Oxendine.
Can you hear me okay, everyone? Okay, very good. So it is my pleasure to introduce Dr. Randy Bridges. He's the son of Dr. Robert Bridges, and he's going to come forward and share some comments about his dad and his personal life and remembering him as father-son relationship, and also talk about his career. So at this time, Dr. Bridges, if you would come forward, and while he's doing that, I will highlight some of his accomplishments. He has served as a superintendent, as an educator in several states, including North Carolina, South Carolina, Virginia. He has been a teacher. He has been a coach. He has been an assistant superintendent, probably, I'm sure, a principal along the way, associate superintendent, director of human resources, and also director of public relations. And I believe, I hope that I'm correct when I say, I believe that Randy also attended UNC Pembroke, maybe his undergraduate or his graduate. You have to do a promo here. So it's so nice to see you and have you join us and to share your comments and your memories about your dad.
Mr. Chairman, members of the board, and Superintendent Truitt, thank you for inviting me here this morning. Well, I had this morning, but this afternoon. My sister, LaPonda Parker, could not be here today. She is with the Charlotte-Mecklenburg school system and does teacher training and support. And they had a big session this morning, so she is there. Dr. Townsend Smith, I really do appreciate the call I got from you several weeks ago, inviting me here for recognition of my dad, as well as all members of the Raising Achievement and Closing the Gap Commission. Mr. Chairman, I've got 3 pages here, but it's really not. I had to do the font really large so I could see it. So if you could bear with me for about 10 minutes, I'll be good. My father really enjoyed the work with the commission. And I know that because in his autobiography, From My Culture to the Mainstream and Back Again, and that's so Bob Bridges. He listed several items of accomplishment in the back of his book, and he had a lot. I'll say that to you, but he had a letter from the Wake County Board of Education nominating him for Superintendent of the Year, and he became Superintendent of the Year by the North Carolina School Board Association. He received the Order of the Longleaf Pine. But very prominently back there in abbreviated form, he had those 12 recommendations from the commission. So I knew that meant a lot to him. I enjoyed scanning that again. He always picked at me about trying to make complex issues very simple. So I didn't read the whole thing, but he knew I got the gist of it. And I'm so pleased when I look at the 3 goals of the state board and Superintendent Truitt, that verbiage and those words and those connections are in both plans. And that's a good thing for the children of the state of North Carolina as we continue on this journey to provide a quality education to each one of them. I'm in less control of my emotions. Come back to that. I'm going to tell you a story. And then I'm going to talk a little bit about some suggestions. I wouldn't be a good educator if I didn't give you all some suggestions before I leave. I've been playing golf for about 35 years. Not really good at it, but I'm okay. And I started because when I graduated from college, and I did attend what was Pembroke State University, now the University of North Carolina at Pembroke, both undergraduate and master's degree. My coaching peers played golf, and they said, "Randy, you need to play." And so I said, "Sure, I can do that." I was a pretty good high school and college athlete, at least in my opinion. And I figured my athletic ability alone could let me master this game. I mean, how hard can it be just to hit a ball? So I played and well, I bought me an old set of clubs and started playing and didn't do very well. And, I'd put the clubs down and pick them up a month or two later and still didn't do very well. And that continued for a while I was single. And then, of course, I got married and had 2 children and trying to build a career. So golf just wasn't in the equation. But I liked the game. So occasionally I would go out there and sense that frustration because I still wasn't playing very well. And as I got a little older and my wife would say to me when I'd come in from playing, "How'd you do?" And I would say, "Not very well." And she knows I'm a pretty competitive person. So one Christmas, she and my children gave me 6 golf lessons. And I said, okay. So I took the 6 lessons over a 3-month period of time. And what I learned was the pro taught me the foundation and the fundamentals of golf. He taught me the grip, the stance, alignment, putting, chipping, how to get out of the sand trap, the distance that you needed to hit a certain club. He gave me the foundation. And when I started working on that, I got better. Now, again, I'm not gonna have you thinking I'm a great golfer, but I got better. So why do I tell you that story? We have elementary school students who are not reading on grade level. We have middle school students who are reading at the elementary level. We have high school students who are reading at the middle school level. And you can't quite get a middle and high school student and pull them aside like what happened to me and teach them the foundation or the fundamentals. Doesn't work out very well. But we have such great educators in the state of North Carolina that they find these kids where they are and figure out a way to move them forward for success. But somewhere in the process, that foundational piece will always come back into play. I know because I was one of those kids. So how do we do that? Well, my father, when I got that master's degree from University of North Carolina at Pembroke, wanted me to be an elementary school principal. He just kept hammering me with that, and he took me to a couple of elementary schools with principals that he really liked and respected, and I'd spend a day or so with them because he said, "Randy, this is where you can make a difference, the elementary school level." Well, needless to say, I did just about everything in public education except working in elementary school. Not really by design, but it just happened to be that way. But later on in life, after he had retired and I was in the superintendency, and I occasionally would call him, normally when I thought I'd screwed up something, but I called him one day and I'd made a decision on something that was pretty critical and it was bothering me. And I talked to him about it. And at the end of our conversation, I said, "You know what? I should have just became an elementary school principal." And he responded, "Well, it's not too late." And I said, "No, I don't think any superintendent would hire it for several years." I told him that class size matters. And in K2, I would try to get the teacher-student ratio as small as I could, and I would make sure that every classroom had an instructional assistant, K2. And finally, I think what we need to do to help kids to close some of these gaps is we got to figure out a way how they get more time and more help. It's really that simple. It's not a complex thing. How do we get them more time and more help? For that reason, in my elementary school, they'd be on a year-round calendar. Because now this is 17 years ago, when there was 9 weeks in school and 3 weeks of intersession. And I found with that formula, I could grow the school year for the children with the greatest needs. His response to most of that was, "Sounds pretty good. Why don't you think a superintendent would hire you to be an elementary school principal if you were going to run the school that way?" I said, "Well, I don't have any experience." He says, "No, it's not about experience, it's about leadership and about loving children. And you got both of those." There's nothing in those 5 items that's new to anybody in this room. But it was a pretty interesting conversation 17 years ago. Could you do those things today? Absolutely. And this is my recommendation or suggestion or for your consideration. If we want our schools to be innovative and creative and meeting the needs of all kids, got to give them some flexibility. And flexibility with resources. And resources to me are people, time, space, information, technology, and finally, money. I would believe that if you were to, and I'm really a K2 person now. I'm not saying that the other grades aren't important because they all are. But the foundational piece is there. And if you get it right there, the other things will fall in line. But guess what? Everybody in this room knows that. Everybody in this room knows that. And we've known it for years. Not doing a lot about it. We're working toward it. But we're not doing enough. So I wish you would create some pilots across the state of North Carolina. K2 pilots. And get some of these wonderful ideas from educators and leaders in these school systems because they're there. They're just waiting for the opportunity. But you can't put them in a position of robbing Peter to pay Paul. You can't say you can do this, but I'm going to take this away. Or you've got to make a choice. You can have this, but you can't have that. Not on these K2 pilots. Let's find some other resources to say, and you can make it competitive. What is it you would like to do to solidify the foundation of these kids, particularly the ones with the greatest needs at the K2 level? And this is the perfect time. You're coming off a pandemic. I'm not really big into learning loss, but I think it's instruction that we never gave them. So think about that. And you've got superintendents and principals and teachers that can do some really neat things, but don't put them in a position where they've got to make a choice. Make this special, make it pilots, and give them an opportunity to do that. I thank those of you, Superintendent Truitt and the members of the board, for recognizing our father and the Raising and Achievement and Closing the Gap Commission. Great work, great recommendations, and the journey has continued. I thank you all for being leaders during a time that's unique and difficult, not only in North Carolina, but across the world. I pray for you all every night. And I want to thank you for your commitment to the children of the state of North Carolina, but especially these: Des, Bryce, Gray, and Nova. Those are my grandkids. And you got to get it right or they won't make it. Thank you.
Dr. 90, do you have?
About education and all about returning to the concept of what we need to do something about the cover page on the report. Thank you so much.
Dr. Oxendine. You know, when you hear something like what Dr. Bridges shared with us from his heart, pretty powerful. I think some Bridges pilots across our state be in order, and we need to figure out a way to turn Dr. Bridges' vision into action, just as his father's vision is a challenge to us. So when he has a chance to join us, we'll certainly make that presentation. And how appropriate that the next thing on our agenda is how we support districts and schools and principals and teachers in closing those achievement gaps and providing that education to all children. And to lead us through this next item in our agenda, I'll turn to Drs. Emery, Edmonds, and Martin, and a group of district leaders.
Well, hello. I would like to say that Dr. Bridges sounded the alarm, and in district and regional support, we are trying our best to answer. So this presentation was supposed to be in the morning, so we're working toward that. Superintendent Truitt, Chairman Davis, school board members, and advisors. It is with great pleasure that we bring an update about our CARES initiative. The purpose of this initiative was to assist those whose support needs may have been exacerbated by the pandemic. Leadership within district and regional support with regional directors, tiered districts and schools based on school designation data, EDS rate as defined in the West Ed report, and district and school readiness for support. Through this work, we identified 6 districts and 44 schools that were eligible based on those criteria. Last November, we also presented possible roles that would be beneficial to these districts. We identified a district leadership coach that would be a support to the superintendent and local board, a school leadership coach that would be a support to assist with best practices and school improvement planning. And one element that is different from our previous turnaround efforts was the district curriculum coach. Based on several data sources, we knew that district-wide assistance was needed with curriculum alignment and standards implementation. Our belief with this menu of services is not one size fits all. It has been our goal to use these types of services to create a customized, personalized plan based on diagnostics and getting to the root cause of some of the barriers to improvement. This slide represents the districts where we have entered into a partnership agreement. The burgundy represents a district model, while the blue represents supports of a school or schools within a district. The totality of our effort supports 33,600 plus students, 2,700 plus educators, and 78 total schools in 24 districts. At this time, I invite Dr. Emery to join me to talk about a little bit more about our approach and to introduce our partners. Dr. Emery.
Thank you, Dr. Martin. Thank you all for this opportunity. Those numbers are awesome, right? But I want you to know the list has over 400 on it. And we're excited today because we know the best evaluation of our work is not us telling you about it, but our customers telling you about it. And so we're excited to have districts here today who represent very different levels of support and interaction to share with you in just a few moments what this work has looked like in their districts. Am I running slides? Are you running slides? Am I running slides? Okay. I have been called a dinosaur. Thank you. Dr. Martin talked about the logistics of the work, But I just want folks to understand that we literally spent hundreds of hours collaborating to look at how we could support districts and customize the work. And there are lots of models out there. There are turnaround models. There is research to support what works. But what we know is that a state agency can't go in and wave a magic wand. So our collaborating time, our look at planning and customization was really about how to teach people to fish versus trying to create loaves and fishes. It was about what can we do as a state agency that will help grow and sustain the work in that local district or school. We really knew that this was about listening and partnering. It was about customizing. It was about building support structures that met the unique needs of our schools and districts. I want to just say thank you and recognize the people in this room who are here, because this was not just a division. It was not just a regional person. It was not just the superintendent of a district. This is truly a partnership. And so when I ask you if you would just stand or raise your hand, I would like the room to understand all of the partners who are here today. Some of our board members in this room, Dr. Oxentine, Mr. Duncan, also know that partnerships take time. And sometimes our ability to create infrastructure comes from years of building relationships in districts. And you will hear more about that in just a few minutes. But I do want to ask those partners who are here from districts to please stand. And I know that you will be moving to the table soon, but our partners from Terrell and from Robinson, if you would stand. The teamwork behind this support are regional directors, district and regional support, coaches, state board members. If any of you are here who have been on the team who have played a support role, would you please stand and be recognized? As Dr. Martin mentioned, the menu of support matters. It looks different in every place that we work. It is based on diagnostic data and the needs of those districts as articulated by them. What are the one or two levers that we can activate in a school or district that will help them see improved outcomes for children? And finally, leadership matters. And so I also want to commit to you today that this has been great fun and amazing work. And as one of us exits, I am happy to pass the baton to Dr. Catherine Edmonds, who will close out this presentation today and share with all of you our commitment that this will be smooth and seamless, and that the support to our districts, we hope they won't even notice that there's a difference as we transition this work. I'm also delighted to introduce some folks who feel like family to me. I want to say thank you to Robeson County Board. We are lucky today. We didn't know we were going to have Chairman Mike Smith, Vice Chair Craig Lowry, who will speak on behalf of the Robeson County Board. We have Assistant Superintendent Dr. Robert Locklear. Robert and the board members have been around for the full 3 years of this journey, and we're excited for you to hear from them. I do want to mention we are also incredibly grateful for the humble leadership of their superintendent, Dr. Freddie Williamson, who says, I'll come back to the board in a little bit when I've got some good stuff to show you in terms of results. These people have done all the work up until this point, so I want you to hear from them. They will also be followed by our colleagues and partners from Terrell. And I just want to lift up that Superintendent Holley is here today. And this gentleman gave up driving his bus route that he's been driving pretty much every day to be a part of this board meeting. That you may chuckle, but this is reality. This man's been driving a bus since school started, so his kids could be in school. And he is also joined by his district coach, Dr. Ron Hargrave, and we're thrilled to have all of you. And if I could ask you all to come to the panel here. While they're doing that, I also just want to say a quick thank you to all the division directors. I noticed maybe one or two of you stood, whether that's standards in curriculum or EC. When we reach out to you and say, this district needs math support, or this district needs you to come help them with their ESSER applications, the directors at DPI have never said, well, I can't do that. It's always when and where can we support you? And a final thank you to Elaine Darby, who makes us look good today with the videos that you'll see later. Welcome, folks. We're glad to have you.
Now, nervous enough being up here, and now I get to go first. Good afternoon. My name is Craig Lowry. I'm a school board member from the public schools of Robeson County. Last year, I was the chairman of the board, and this year, Mr. Mike Smith, who's back here, is the chairman of the board. And Dr. Bridgers, who was speaking, I spoke to him outside, and I know we're pressed for time, but I seen him play basketball when he was at UNCP, so I've known him a long time. And I'm a believer, if you're in education and can't show emotion, something's wrong. I've always been a believer of that. If you're involved with education, education is emotional, period. I need to thank some people real quick. Mr. Alan Duncan, Miss Jessica Sawinski, Dr. Emery, Dr. Oxendine, and I wanted to say that now so I didn't forget names later on. Let me tell you a little story, give you some quick information. I was in public education for 33 years. I was a teacher, principal, director of child nutrition, and several different things, and I coached for about 20 years. But 3 years ago, DPI was coming to Robeson County, and I was skeptical. What are they coming here for? They gonna take us over? They gonna tell us what we're doing wrong? What are they coming here for? And we got involved with meetings with them. Of course, they were doing a lot of meetings with our central office, and then we would come in and get summaries. And it was like, well, these folks are trying to help. They were trying to help our system. And folks, that's what they've done for the last 3 years. They've helped our system and continue to do so. There would be meetings with the central office staff, and then there would be follow-up meetings with board members. This past September in 2020, we had a change of superintendents. And having known Miss Jessica and Dr. Emery, meeting with them a little bit more, we started talking at that time about them coming to our system and then doing some workshops. As chairman, I felt like we needed some workshops on team building. Our board, remember this number, we have 11 school board members. And in elections last year, we elected 5 new members. Felt like we needed some stuff on team building and just roles about what the board is supposed to do. So in conversations with those ladies, we put those things together. And we ended up planning on doing this in November. Well, at the same time, we were looking for a new superintendent. And really, some of us didn't want to go through that process of looking at them boxes of resumes. So it come across that a gentleman was interested in coming to Robeson County named Dr. Freddie Williamson. I think his name already been mentioned. Well, I had heard of him, but I really didn't know him. Mr. Smith and I met him, and we had some conversations. And we ended up bringing in Dr. Williamson for an interview. And it so happened that his interview night was the same day we did those team building situations with the ladies from DPI. What happened would not have happened, I really believe, if we hadn't done the team building that day. Because now there's always going to be differences on the board. Remember, how many board members we got? 11. Remember that, 11. 5 of them's new. So we do the team building, groups of 3 or 4. You know, I felt like that we might have Dr. Williamson that night. I really did. Didn't know what the vote would be. But anyway, we do a 2-hour interview with him, answer questions. He lays out, we're back and forth with conversations with the board members. Somebody says, let's have a vote. So we had to vote for him to be superintendent. Guess what the vote was? 11 to 0 to hire him as superintendent. Now, folks, that don't happen. That don't happen. It was amazing that night. If you've heard sometime you need to have been there, I can't tell you how amazing it was. You had to be there. to see it. And to hear comments people made that I never thought I would hear. Our board got closer. Now, do we still have differences? Every board's going to have differences. It just comes with the territory. But through the help of Miss Jessica and Dr. Emery, what they did and what they helped us put together, they facilitated the interviews that night where I could kind of sit back and not get in trouble. They were just so helpful in what was done. And conversations with Mr. Duncan too was extremely helpful. So from Robinson County, I just thank them for what they did and where we're at now. We are moving forward. And I know a lot of you in here know Dr. Williamson, and he's doing a fantastic job for us. So thank you.
And since I have the pleasure of working with Dr. Williamson every day, I can echo what Mr. Lowry said, that we have the best superintendent in the state of North Carolina. So, but anyway, I want to give you a perspective as a partner with DPI. But first, let me give you some background. I'm an ex-military guy, served 12 years on active duty, left active duty, and guess what I decided to do? Become a teacher. Dr. Oxendine, where did she go? Dr. Oxendine, oh, there you are behind the podium. As a matter of fact, I remind her today that she taught a writing lesson to my third graders when I had the pleasure of serving at Green Grove Elementary, my second year teaching. So after active duty, I became a teacher. What a world of difference from being so strategic to being very strategic, because teaching is much harder than the military. Don't let them tell you otherwise. I've been in both. So anyway, I had the pleasure of serving third and fourth grade students for 4 years. Then I became an assistant principal for 3 years. After that, I served as principal for 13 years. And I have been at the district office now for 6 years in 2 different roles. One as assistant superintendent for federal programs, and the other as my current role is assistant superintendent for curriculum, instruction, and accountability. So I've seen it all. I've been through it all. And I'm here to tell you that it has been worthwhile. So 3 years ago, when I was first introduced to our EC department, after some issues that we were having, we had a meeting with one of your deputy superintendents by the name of Marie Petrie Martin. Does that name sound familiar? She was a nice lady. Until that day, I sat down with her in the conference room. And I looked at the superintendent at the time and I asked her, what did you get me into? Because, ladies and gentlemen, our EC department was in turmoil. It was in shambles. It needed a lot of work. And I remember the superintendent saying, Robert, you can fix it. And there's some people in this room that if it had been for them, Sherry, I want to say thank you. To Dr. Oxendine, to Mr. Duncan. To Jessica. Because I don't want to get emotional, but sometimes you have to be honest. But I was in a tough situation. Very difficult. Mr. Duncan, Dr. Oxendine, Mr. Mike Smith, Mr. Craig were the ones that helped me get through it. Because I was ready to leave public schools of Robinson County. I didn't feel like I was supported, and I could never make the right decision. So anyway, after Dr. Marie came in and spoke with us, I realized then that if it's on my plate, I'm gonna get it done, with or without those at the top. Because my name is associated with. And if you know me, and some of you do, I believe in doing things right the first time. I don't like things done over and over and over. So after she left that day, I started thinking, and she introduced me to Sherry and her team and how we could make our EC department better. Because we had no other choice. We were sending 500 IEPs overdue, out of compliance. Ladies and gentlemen, that's a major task to get them all in compliance. And they gave us 2 years. So we were able to hire a director who was a assistant principal at the time. She came on board. The board allowed us to hire an assistant director. Miss Sherry helped me work through the numbers with our teachers at the time. We felt like we had too many teachers and not getting the job done. So we were able to convert those into compliance specialists. So we had the opportunity to hire 10 compliance specialists to help us oversee the action plan. So during that 3-year engagement, we developed an action plan that was signed off by the EC department. We met bi-monthly with DPI and our regional support team and our district office leaders. And during that time, we were able to discuss where we were and making sure that we were on time, on our timeline to make sure we got everything done by May of 2021. So we started this in January of 2019, and we had to have everything in compliance within May of 2021. So once we done that, we were able to have those crucial conversations. So we were able to develop some professional development that really helped our EC teachers to understand what their role was, because a lot of that had not been done. That was overlooked. And it was like, to say that you're out of compliance, it was like that was no big deal to them. But ladies and gentlemen, I took that very seriously, very serious. And so we had to make some changes in our staffing. So some of our EC teachers, we could no longer work with them. So they took other positions. But once we got our staff in place, we were able to make major changes. So in May of 2021, DPI, along with Ms. Thomas and her department, along with our partners from the state board, we were able to sign off saying that we were in compliance as of May 2021. And guess what? There's still work to do, but we're not going to be in the shape we were in 3 years ago. I can tell you that, as long as I'm in this role. So anyway, I want to also talk to you about a leadership program that DPI has been so instrumental in helping us, because, you know, in order to be a good leader, you have to have a good support team. And I can honestly say that Miss Jessica, Bev, all of those, Alessandro, I can't remember all the names because there's so many, and I do apologize. I don't have my list up here in front of me, but you know who I'm talking about. All of my partners from DPI, putting together our North Carolina Instructional Leadership Academy, which is through Relay Leverage Leadership. We were able to focus on working and building capacity of principals through the tenets of their instructional leadership. This was an intensive training, and what a difference it made, because it made principals open their eyes and realize that I have to be the instructional leader of this campus. I can no longer be that daily manager. So our board allowed us to hire assistant principals on every campus that did not have an assistant principal. So that principal could now be the instructional leader of that building. And the assistant principal was now the daily operational leader. What a difference. What a difference that has made. So I hope to be back with you in about 3 or 4 years, right before I retire, and give you an update on how our instructional leadership is going in the public schools of Robeson County. So with that program being in place, I want to thank Dr. Emery and her staff for working with Relay Graduate School of Education to make sure this happened. And since we are the first cohort in this endeavor, I can honestly tell you, after going through my doctorate and 2 master's degrees and a bachelor's degree in 12 weeks, I think I've done more work in this professional development than I did over those entire years of working on those degrees. It was very intensive. There was a lot of research. There was a lot of reading requirements. There were a lot of projects you had to do, all in 12 weeks to get you ready to start school. So it was like late nights for me, not much time for the weekend to do anything, because I had to make sure, as the district leader, I had to make sure that I was up on my game. So I had to be prepared. So we were able to work with 12 principals, and those 12 principals were able to bring on 2 of their staff members, and most of those were teachers. So we trained 36 individuals in leverage leadership in 12 weeks. And if you're familiar with Paul Santoya's book, Leverage Leadership, Get Better Faster, all those books, it was Jessica was that a crash course in 12 weeks, wasn't it? Jessica and I cried together. Alessandra, we were thought partners a lot. Alessandro, Fran, is Fran in here? Fran, I saw Fran at the food truck. Yeah, thank you for offering me those gummy bears while we're waiting on our food. But Fran, lots of great conversations with you, and I thank you for being that partner with me also, and all the rest of you. So with the goal of the partnership was to deepen our knowledge and skill in key levers of leadership, build that capacity through proficiency with core content, build support implementation of best practices with a select group of schools and supervisors, and of course, to engage in collaborative learning and strategic thinking. So with those 12 schools being selected and the principal and the 2 leaders, there were 4 individuals from the district office that were also trained. Myself, Ms. Jennifer Freeman, who's our Assistant Superintendent for Federal Programs, Wendy Dorsey Carr, who is our Executive Director of Transformation, and Mr. Andrew Davis, who is our Director of Curriculum Instruction. There were 5. Dr. Sandra Evans, our K-8 supervisor. So the 5 of us were the district leaders. And so, like I said, we began this training in the summer of 2021, and it has really made a world of difference. We've had several sessions with our partners. We've had several conversations throughout the last few weeks and months. And if you've ever heard research when it comes to BLOS and BLOS, it says that specific behaviors of instructional leadership, such as making suggestions, giving feedback, modeling effective instruction, soliciting opinions, supporting collaboration, providing professional development opportunities, and giving praise for effective teaching, is very important if we're going to be those instructional leaders to move our schools forward. Like the young man said, earlier, I think about my niece and my nephew. Are they getting what they need? So the 21,600 that we serve in the public schools of Robeson County, that's what I get up for every day, is to make sure they get what they need. So with that, we have ongoing coaching and support, like I said, from our DPI partners. And we want to make sure that, and I guess I'm appealing to the board and saying, we want to make sure that we get funding for the next 2 years, because I know this is an endeavor that we have to continue, because we want to see what happens at the end of 3 years. So ongoing coaching and support is critical and an integral part of the model for schools, as well as state and district leaders who are participating in this training. So with the regional support coaching model for the North Carolina Instructional Leadership Academy participants, it was designed to create nested coaching for the state, district, and school-based leaders. So we're all getting trained on how to run schools more effective. So with that being said, when it comes to local commitments, we have committed, like I said, to our 14 assistant principals. We have, the board was allowed us to hire an academic coach for all of our K-8 schools. Also, K-2 and interventionists, like the young man said, those K-2 programs are vital in order for us to meet the needs of our students. So when they do become third graders, they're not so far behind. And we have placed a lot of emphasis on our K2 program this year. And the board allowed us to hire 2 K2 curriculum specialists, and we're hoping to have more in the near future. And also we were able to hire an additional school leadership coach. So all of our schools, all of our school leaders have a thought partner with them every day. Not meaning on campus every day, but they have access to them, whether it's via email, text messaging, telephone. And then of course, with our 3 district NCDPI partners, those 3 individuals serve 18 schools and they're on our campuses every day. So they're in our district full time. So we want to say thank you for allowing that to happen. So we want to remain connected in this work and have those open lines of communication through those bi-monthly cabinet meetings, which we are currently doing. As a matter of fact, Jessica and I missed a meeting today, but we had an excuse. So Dr. Williamson allowed us to be here today so we could share all the great things. But those conversations are very vital in order for us to make sure that we are all on the same page, because it's not DPI versus the public schools of Robeson County. It's DPI working collaboratively with the public schools of Robeson County to make sure that we are meeting the needs of all of our students, making sure we have all the resources that we need to help our teachers to grow every single day, to make sure that if there's something that we can tweak to make it better, because it's all about growing. Because when it comes to education, you can always learn something new and you can always make things better. But if you don't have the love for it, you don't care about students, then I tell people, then this is not a job for you. And that's as plain as I can say it. You have to have the love. You have to have that love here in order to move schools forward. And I hope and pray that I was able to share that with you today. And I'll take any questions, I guess, at the end of the session. Thank you.
So my school leadership coach, or SLC, is Tony. Tony has done a really great job of building a safe relationship with me as the principal. Oftentimes, it can be a bit scary as a building administrator to let someone into your circle and talk about your practices in the building. But Tony worked really hard to establish a relationship built on trust. One of the things that impressed me most was her experience as a building principal. She's done the work that I'm doing. She's walked in my shoes, and that meant a lot to me.
And so as leaders, they model what they want us to do. We practice, and practice some more what we should do in our buildings when we go back, so we can easily and quickly implement those strategies. And it's very intense, very intense.
One of the things that she suggested that really has changed one of our practices here was moving the talk about the talk about data from just a conversation to something that's living and breathing in our building. So we transformed our conference room. We're at the home of the Warriors here at Pembroke Middle School, from the Warrior Room to our War Room. And in our War Room is where the strategy takes place. And so our entire room has been transformed into living, breathing data from our students. We have our students up. We are constantly monitoring how they're doing on the common assessments that we're making in the building. We're looking for trends. We're looking for patterns that not just informs our instruction. So when the POC sees, okay, obviously we missed the mark here, we need to go back and revisit this standard, but it also helps inform our student support team. So our student support team are our counselors, our social workers. We have some youth development specialists on campus that help us with attendance and truancy. And when we look at that data, we're also looking at, well, what can we do as a student support team to support what's happening in the classroom?
We need this more than ever before. With COVID causing a setback within our education, we have to rethink and reinvent how we are doing instruction within our classrooms. And so what they're providing us are some great coaching techniques that we can use to grow our teachers and to grow our students. So I'm very strategic now in what I'm doing. So the first thing, the managerial aspects of leadership, I've passed that over to my assistant principals. So therefore, I am more as the instructional leader. I'm really engaged in those classrooms, providing the observation and feedback for our teachers. We're implementing practice clinics weekly. And so because I am now able to free myself up to be the instructional leader, that has greatly improved, I think, my ability to lead our school.
We are very grateful to have the opportunity to have these leadership coaches in our building. I think their experience speaks for itself. And having someone in your building, in your ear, walking these halls with you that have not only done the work, but have done the work well, have really been successful in their craft. That's just smart. It's just a smart practice to put those folks right on the front lines with building principles. So just very honored and grateful to have Tony as my leadership coach. And I'm grateful that the Public Schools of Robeson County is involved in this initiative. And I really hope it's something that other principals across the state will get the opportunity to participate in.
Good evening. I believe we are. Check my time. It's almost nap time. Yes. I am Oliver Holley, Superintendent of Terrell County Schools, and I'm thankful to be here today. Before I start talking about the great work that we're doing and our team is doing in Terrell, I just want to thank a couple of people. First of all, the Terrell County School Board, because without their buy-in, none of this work would be successful. Many of us sit here, we understand that as we've heard, transitions and things happen. But if you want district improvement, it has to start with your district leadership, which is your board. So I really want to thank them for believing in this work, assisting in this work, and giving us the chance to work through these ups and downs and the hurdles, because it is new. As you've heard Robeson County state earlier, the first thing when we started talking about, a district support team, folks are like, oh my God, DPI is coming. What are we doing wrong? But I would tell you through that work, just in the first couple of sessions, as you'll see me talk about today, that team had a great conversation with our staff and our students in some cases, but with our board to get that buy-in to the work. And so that's what we're going to talk about today. Just listening, I'm a little salty. I heard, Ms. Fran had gummy bears, so I need to become friends with her because I'm a gummy bear fiend. But to that, when you go and you present and you sit down and you come up with, slides and notes that you want to talk about. And if you're like me, you walk in and then all of that goes to the wayside. And it's easy to talk about when you talk about the great folks that do this work. I came into Terrell County October 2018. And as I was studying for the interview, interview for superintendencies, you try to remember the principals, you try to remember the names of the schools and how many you have. It was easy for me. We had 3. But I walked in and 2 of those individuals were no longer there. And so I share that with you is I walked in as a brand new superintendent with a brand new staff of educational leaders in all of my buildings. Our principals right now, we do not have a principal in Terrell County School that has more than 4 years of experience. So as we start talking about that, I want you to understand how important this work is for not even just molding me as a brand new superintendent, but I've got individuals that walked in that door the same day I did. And so we're going to talk a little bit about that. First time when I tell everybody where you from, Terrell County, it's like, where's Terrell from? I'm glad the map showed up. The easiest way I can describe it to you is when you hit 64 going to the beach, when you hit the 35 zone from the 4 lane, you better do 35. 35 is not 36, it's not 37, it's not 38, it's 35. Now, I love the blue lights because we know, when those tickets come in, we get the money for the school and we can use it. But in all seriousness, we're a small district. If you blink, you go right through us. We have 162 employees in the district. We're sitting now with a 14% loss of students because of infrastructure. September 2019, on a Wednesday, we woke up, our prison closed. Unfortunately, being from Elizabeth City, we had the unfortunate incident in our prison in Elizabeth City. So the state went and they kind of refigured and they closed our prison and they started sending people away. But when you're talking about business, you know what happens when you close a business. Parents leave. Parents leave and they take their kids. From 2017 to 2021, we saw a 14% drop in our students. Even as early as yesterday, we had a report, I think it was North Carolina Business Magazine, reported that 53% of our county, Terrell County, is owned by the state and the federal government. Now, it's probably not the right place to say that, room, but tax value changes when the feds and the state get it. Farming. So we don't have the tax base. Overnight, Terrell County Schools went from the #3 provider of employment in Terrell County to #1. We lost White Cap, which was the company that does all of the linen for the beach. They shut down. That Wednesday, we woke up, the prison closed. We went to #1. So I say all that to say this. We have challenges as the second smallest PSU, depending on how many kids are in Hyde County this morning. It changes often between the two of us. But with that loss in tax base, I will give it to our county commissioners, our aldermen, our town manager, Mr. Rhett White, our county manager, Mr. David Clegg, our school board. They fought and worked with I keep calling him Doctor, but Treasurer Farwell, to try to look at ways that we can do it. So I give you that background to understand the scope of just funding that we have. As a district, we're looking at 36% of our students identified as Caucasian, 30.6% of our students identify as African-American or Black. Once you look at that, we have a growing population, 21.9% Latinx. And then we have a 1.3% of Asian. When you look at our makeup of our county, we have to put things in place. When you look at our data, the actual college attainment of our students going for our population is very low. So anything that we can do for our students is a blessing, and it actually prepares them for the real world. Year after year, we've ended up being higher than the state average in graduation rate. We've been recognized for the last 3 years, and Mr. Ziegler, he texts me, he's listening, so shout out to Mr. Ziegler. Our high school principal, we have actually had over 67% of our students to take college courses at Beaufort Community College. So those opportunities are for our students. Just because of our small population and our geographical, distance away from Raleigh, our kids still deserve the same education as folks 10 minutes from this building. I say that, and I use this as my next introduction. This gentleman in front of me, J. Wendell Hall. He's been fighting that, and ever since I've known him, that's the comment he makes. There is a school system on the other side of 64. Ms. Jill Commence, being our other board member, I thank her for the work because their conversations and their push and their fight helps us continue to do what we do in the Northeast. So I want to thank you for that as well. As I told you, Terrell County is our second smallest PSU in the state. I've told you September 19th, we woke up, we were now the first employer in the district. I've told you about our 14% drop in student ADM. With that, we have 6 directors. In those 6 directors in our district, none of them outside of maintenance, our food and nutrition director, and our finance officer have more than 4 years of experience. So let me loop this back to you. We have the same reports that are due that Wake County sends with twice the work. Now, how the CARES Act team supports us in that is coming in with us having such a younger staff, and not just in our administration, in our building, but with our teachers as well. We have been able through this partnership, and if you look at we talk about the customization of this. This is the beauty of this program, because what works in one district might not work in Columbia. It might not work in Wake. It may not work in Robinson. My program doesn't look like theirs. Our younger principals need that support. So as I talked to you about coming in and folks having the fear of, DPI, we got over that once the team came in and had those conversations. Now, there's a gentleman in this room, Mr. Keith Kramer. I don't know if you've ever had the blessing of interacting with Keith Kramer. I think the man runs off of caffeine and high octane. At 6 o'clock in the morning, he's sending emails. But him getting in and having those conversations with our teachers broke down those barriers. Miss Katrina Davis, she's with us as well. Miss Katrina Park, I'm sorry. She's had those conversations. But you look at it here. Our MOU was signed on 3/20. Our leadership team came in and we started having in-depth conversation around how we can move the district forward. Let me make myself very clear. Our district was doing great things. The problem is sometimes you have to tighten a couple of bolts. And it's hard to do when you don't have the resources. And it's also harder to do when you have a young staff that does not understand what screwdriver to grab or which wrench to use. And so our principal support coach, Miss Dr. Heading, has been in, and she has been a wonderful blessing to our beginning principals. She's built that relationship where they can come in, and we were talking about in the other districts. And the other video that just played was having that safe space. That is a blessing that we've had as a team. As we talk about the customization, we had walked in October of 18, we had a district plan, strategic plan that needed to be redone. When this CARES Act team walked in and said they were a district support, they really mean it. Chairman Davis, they are really a district support. They have worked with our teachers, our custodians, our cafeteria workers, our bus drivers, but they've also, as you've heard from the chair of Robinson County, and I hope I said it right. Gotcha. Robinson, I got it right. I got a couple of friends that'll be upset if I mispronunciate that. But that work has actually gone to our chair and our board is all. We have conversations. They are comfortable enough that they can talk to Dr. Hargrave, our coach, that they can reach out to Dr. Stickney. Let me get some more clarification about this topic. And so that's where the work has begun and moved in our district. As you start looking at it, it's hard for me to see way across the room, so I'm gonna turn to this way. But as you see, we looked at the PD planning. We've actually put in our PLCs. It's kind of hard to do PLCs when you don't have a strong structure around it. So being able to go in and put those structures in place for our principals and our teachers have been a great addition to our district. Also looking at the additional supports of the academic standards. One thing that we realize is a small district, and don't get mad, I had more students in my middle school when I was a principal in Terrell County and in Northampton than I did in the whole district. We came in, we looked at our data. We could have moved our schools in our entire district if we had moved at least 20 kids to the next proficiency level. But when you have so many people that are doing so many jobs, it's hard and you lose that focus. This team has allowed us to be able to differentiate some of our structure, continue to train and uplift our principals, and then to build those teacher leaders. One of the things that we developed from this team is we sat down with our principals and said, what is it that you need to be successful? All three of those principals said we need instructional coaches, we need a reading specialist, and we need other supports. Well, I can tell you through this work, looking at our budgets, looking at the team support from that, we've been able to hire 2 out of the 3. So if you know anybody who wants to do secondary curriculum and wants to come 45 minutes from the beach, send them to Terrell because we're looking for something. But those are the types of things that we've been able to do through this partnership. And then as I wrap up, I just think about the regional support. Dr. Stickney has come in, and even before the whole CARES Act thing has, and I won't say thing, but the program shifted in, just being able to have that contact when we have questions, to have that person that we can actually reach out to who picks up our phone. And her favorite line is, I don't know, but I'll get back to you. And then guess what? She's going to get back to you. So having that ease and that comfortability. And then the final thing that I just would like to share is, and we talked about this, and I know he's probably going to try to knee me under the table, but just as I talked about the support that our principals and our young directors need, as a new superintendent, I need that help as well. So the fact that we were able to have someone with the expertise as Dr. Hargrave to come in and have those moments, Holley, can you look at it this way? Have you thought about this? Well, let me tell you, this is what I did in Scotland one time, and you may want to try to think, or, have you thought of this? Or if I ask him a question or he doesn't know it, what does he do? He pulls out his phones. That's one of the things that the team is pushing. I push with our new principals, building that professional network. In education, I tell you, we're the greatest thieves of ever. We steal it, we tweak it, and we make it our own. So the success of this team and the success of the work that we have done, yes, it is in the support that we have from DPI around the CARES Act. But it really has the rubber hit the road in Terrell County because of the acceptability of our staff. I don't know if they're listening, they still be in classes, but I got the invite to sit here today to tell you all the great things. And I just came as the messenger because the great things that are happening in Terrell County is only because of the openness of our teachers and our families. You got to think about it. We've made some changes that may seem a little odd to folks because it's new, but the work is only good as the folks that are carrying it out. So I want to thank them. So Dr. Hargrave, once again, I'll tell you, thank you just for those conversations. And now I'll turn it over to Dr. Ron Hargrave, our district leadership support coach for our turnaround in Terrell County Schools.
Thank you, Dr. Holley. And it is certainly a pleasure to have the opportunity to work with you and your staff in Terrell County. Again, my name is Ron Hargrave, and I serve as the district coach in Terrell County and also in Anson County. And I want to lead with a guiding question. Why do I believe that this model has a chance to be successful in helping schools to improve? And before I answer that question, I want to give you 3 names: Sherman Hargrave, Mary Hargrave, and Lillian Long Morgan. Now, the first 2 names are my mom and dad. The next name was my 3rd grade teacher. Those are the 3 of the most important living people that I know of today, and who have impacted my life and have enabled me to sit in this seat and have an opportunity to speak to you today. I mentioned Miss Morgan, because she was the first teacher that I ever believed listened to me. My mom told me that when I was in kindergarten, I was a bright, energetic person. And when I went to 1st and 2nd grade, I barely spoke. And I barely spoke because I rarely ever heard my name used. I was called too tall, or in my mind, I was called, "Are you sure you're in the right grade? Were you in this grade last year? Are you supposed to be?" All those things I was hearing as a youngster. And it wasn't until I got to the 3rd grade that Miss Long, as I was walking in the building, and I remember this just like it was yesterday, walking in the building, and she said, "I know who you are. You're Ronald Hargrave." And when she said that, my whole being lit up. Now, I didn't know this lady, but obviously she knew me and she thought I was important because she called out my name. And it wasn't anything else added to it that would take away from me. And I mentioned listening to me because this model is based on listening. We've tried turnaround before, and at the school level, when you're a part of that, and as I have been in my career, we called it an invasion because it was never explained to us that it was help and support. And we never got the opportunity as a teacher to speak with anyone who was coming into our districts to help us to transform. And obviously our administrators didn't either, because the way they prepared us was from a point of fear that if we didn't get this right, that there were more things that were going to happen to us. And so my lens as what a turnaround model looks like didn't start off great. The reason I believe that this has the greatest chance to be successful is because we have begun this by listening to our partners. We sit down with the superintendent and we listen to what they feel, the superintendents, and we listen to what they feel like are the issues in their district. Because who knows that best? We can look at data sets and we can get this picture of what we believe is happening in that district. But it's not until you have a chance to talk with teachers, to principals, and to the superintendent, do you really know what's going on in the districts. We've made some mistakes in the past. We've made some assumptions. We've assumed that schools that are low performing and schools that are not up to par don't know how to get their schools out of that. But I found that not to always be the case. Sometimes it's not that they don't know how to move from where they are to where they want to be. It may be a capacity issue. It may be that they don't have the staff. It may be that they haven't had the training. It may be that people that are making decisions haven't had the support. And when you look at some of the challenges that Mr. Holley spoke of, and some of the challenges that are happening in Robeson County, those are real. And you don't get that from looking at just sets of data. You don't get to understand that. We understand by listening. And so we began this journey by sitting down with all the leadership in the district. My role was to go in and to build trust and to open up doors so that the support team can come in and work in an environment that is trusting, and that the people in the districts know that these folks are coming to help and not to take anything away from them. So that's one of the things that I try to do first is, and I've said this to every superintendent I've worked with, you give me a couple of weeks, and if you do not feel that you could build a trusting relationship with me, you tell me, and I will leave and not come back. Because this does not work unless we trust one another. And if you don't trust, nobody else in your district is going to trust anybody that comes. And I can tell you that we have people that can do this and that can help your staff do that. I can give you a whole list of things. But if they don't get it from you, if they don't believe the words that you say, it won't be effective. That's one of the reasons I believe this model has the greatest chance of being successful, is because it does begin with us listening. And as we have those conversations with teachers, we allow them to ask questions. We allow them to tell us the concerns that they have in their buildings. We allow principals to do the same. And then we have those individual conversations with the superintendent. And then we bring them together collectively to make sure that we're aligning all the concerns and to let them know that we heard you. In the past, we would come in and we would say, we looked at your data and this is what we're going to do for you. We would spend some time in the district. We would do those things that we said we were going to do, and then we would leave. But along the way, we didn't build the capacity for the district to sustain those efforts once we left. We didn't build those trusting relationships so that if they ran into an issue, that they would feel very comfortable picking up that phone and calling and saying, hey, I got an issue I need some help with. A lot of times when the team left, there was a party thrown because we were glad they were gone because of the way that it was presented to us. I certainly hope this time when the team leaves, there is a party thrown, but I hope it's a celebration of the partnership that we've created. And it's a celebration of the support that from the DPI level all the way to the custodian in the school, everybody knows that we're there to help. And so I could go on and on and on. As you can tell, from a child that wouldn't talk very much, I became a person that loves to talk about education and loves to talk about helping children be successful. And I believe that we have the right people in place. We have the right model in place. We have support at every level with our curriculum coaches, our principal coaches, with our district leadership. If we'll continue to listen and continue to, collaboratively put forth a plan, we can help schools move from where they are to where they desire to be. Now, this is not going to happen overnight. And one of the things that in our conversations that we've said is the school did not get here overnight. So this transformation is not going to happen overnight. But if we get started on the right foot, it has a great chance to yield success. And so I'm thankful to be a part of this and to have the opportunity to work with, our young superintendents and with the boards and to be in the districts. And I love being in the classroom. So thank you for allowing me to get in classrooms and speak to children. And so thank you. And I think at this time we'll receive questions that anybody may have. Do we have a video? Okay.
From the initial meeting, it was mostly about us and what we needed as a district, as opposed to Department of Instruction coming in and saying, hey, this is what we're going to do for you. So it was very much them listening to us. And through those conversations, our biggest weakness, I guess, was with curriculum support. So the greatest asset that we received from the CARES team so far was those direct connections to Department of Instruction, mainly around curriculum and instruction. So, for example, with the work of the CARES team, we've had professional development with our teachers, with DPI, math consultants, and English consultants. So our teachers are able to interact with the people that wrote and helped write those standards and look at those standards. So for us, that was probably the most impactful piece of the CARES team so far.
We've provided support with curriculum, with instruction. We've brought in additional support from DPI to meet the needs of this district in real time. And we have support at every level. We have a district leadership coach that supports our superintendent here at Terrell County Schools with systems and structures across the district. We have our school leadership coach that directly supports principals here in Terrell County Schools and help support curriculum, instruction, those systems and supports, to ensure alignment between the district and each school site. And I serve as the district curriculum coach. And so my focus is on teaching and learning and how I can support that in every school in Terrell County Schools.
And the biggest piece of that too, as Ms. Parker mentioned, is that they listen first. And for us, that's what was most important, is to listen to what our needs are or what our concerns were and developing a plan around that. So, so far it's been wonderful. At CHS, we're dreamers. We dream big. We have high expectations for our students. But in that same scope, we're also realists. We know that we have some areas of growth and some areas that we can really improve upon. And we attack our work with that continuous improvement mindset. Now, DPI has that same continuous improvement mindset. And I think that's the whole reason behind this initiative, is to support schools, to help schools continuously improve. So together, it's always been a partnership focused on student achievement and student growth.
And in that partnership, we've worked really hard to build relationships and trust. And that's been achieved through open dialogue, honest, conversation, questions, and walking alongside each school and the district as a whole to identify needs and to plug in support to meet those needs.
We knew, though, going into this work, it was very clear that it wasn't going to be very simple. It's going to take time. It's founded on really two principles: that it's going to be a process and that it will take time. But with that understanding, we're attacking our work in that manner. We know that it's going to have a lot of crucial conversations. We're going to have to answer a lot of questions, but all those questions are going to lead to improvement and lead to what we want. So yeah, there's going to be some tears along the way, but there's also going to be laughter and a re-energizing and a reimagining why we got to education. to help our students and to really help them succeed. So long-term goal, I'm convinced that with the support of the CARES team, that Columbia High School will be an A school. Again, it's going to be a process, but I'm very confident in the support that we're receiving from DPI and the CARES team that that will happen.
Good afternoon, Chair Davis, Superintendent Truitt, and board members. It is such an honor to, one, have the opportunity to speak after this great panel, and want to say thank you to each of you for your time today to share with us what the model looks like under the CARES dollars. But also, it is such an honor to have the opportunity to lead this work for the agency. We will certainly miss Dr. Emery and the work that she has done, but she's laid a path for us to move forward. So we say thank you. And as we think about, and I think about the work today and the conversations that we've had, and as we've engaged today, what I've heard is that it is clear that this work is the work of the heart. It's a matter of justice. It is a matter of economic growth to realize a system where all children will fare well. This is selfless work, as the board chair has shared, and it's hard work. And there's not a quick fix. So we've heard from our panel today, the work of our district leadership coaches, the work of our school leadership coaches to have a listening ear. I truly believe that the solutions to the work comes from those that are closest to the work. And our team provides the support. In our August board meeting, Dr. Segal and I shared some information around the human resources in the districts. So when we're looking at our curriculum standards, when we're looking at those standards, and the next level for our school district is to take those standards and unpack them, provide resources for teachers for the next level of instruction. And we talked about the disparities across school districts, that the resources were different. But what I've heard from this panel today is that we're helping to bridge that gap. And I know sometimes when there's change, people want to know, okay, what's going to be different? Are we going to go back and rethink everything that we've done? Absolutely not. We will continue with the partnership, with the collaboration that you've seen today. The one piece that we've talked about, and I've heard this panel talk about today, was that instructional support. And we know in our current model, that is one piece that we're looking at building out. And so as the board is looking at BizOp, I think it's BizOp 6 or 7, it talks about, one, ensuring that we can move forward with our school leadership coaches, but also some thinking around how do we implement that instructional coach piece to help in the school districts. As you've heard Superintendent Oliver say that, he's driving a school bus. He has principals that it's been some churn in that position. So how do we continue to help build and work with them on those pieces? And so one thing I will share that I've been a district transformation coach and I've worked in the districts. And so to hear that piece around collaboration, the flexibility, the working within the context of the district and listening, it does my heart so well to know that we are still on that path. And so I look forward to working with the team. I look forward to building out the structures that we have in place in district and regional support so that we can continue this great work. So thank you for the opportunity. And I look forward to working with the districts that we have here, as well as our staff, as I've said. And at this time, I think we're going to take questions. And Dr. Martin, I'm looking at you. Dr. Martin is the leader of the district and regional support team. And so we thank her for her hard work. And through this transition, she has been an absolute gem. She's very innovative in her approach. And Needless to say, I don't do too well with PowerPoints and being creative around those pieces, and she always seems to make it look good for me. So thank you, Dr. Martin. And at this time, we will take questions for the panel or for myself and Dr. Martin and Dr. Emery. Yes, and Dr. Emery. No questions? Okay, Dr. Oxendine.
Of, is there some kind of action steps along the way? Action steps. I hope you heard me. This was not on.
I'll jump into that. This is so I'm a baby. This is my 21st year in education. I've worked in districts for 6 years in one particular district that had turnover models from all around. So I can talk and attest to the point of the listening. Dr. Oxendine, what I can tell you that has happened from that is it's been deliberate planning from those conversations to our action steps of how we move forward. One of the things that our principals have talked about and right now with our middle school and high school principal specifically is coming up from that conversation of how they can plan to move forward and have those curriculum conversations with their teachers as well. And so one of the things that it has actually added to is, and I talked about the adoption of our strategic plan, but it also has tweaked into Mr. Alessandro, the help that we've been able to do our school improvement plans and our overall district improvement plans. In addition to that, it's helped our newer principals and us as a district plan for and actually execute our CNIs. Because you got to think about it. I came in in 18, we turned around, we had a district cognia name change from advanced ed. And then we got thrown right into CNAs and then COVID hit. So we had to reschedule. So now being able to have this support team from the plan of the conversation of what's happening, we've been able to go through our CNIs and then eventually our district plan. So I think I just went around the whole mulberry bush to kind of give you from that conversation. It just wasn't talk. We actually developed a clear, customized plan as we showed in our slide of how Terrell Elementary, because Terrell Elementary doesn't look like Columbia Middle School. Columbia Middle School doesn't look like Columbia High School. So each one of those schools have, from those early conversations with the principals and teachers, complete customized approaches for each one of our district, each one of our schools. So, yep. Mm-hmm.
And I'll just add to that, as he was saying, you can't customize if we don't know what the issues are, if we don't know what the needs are. And so that's what the initial conversations were all about. We know that there are different levels of support that we're ready to bring into the districts, but everybody can't and is not ready to start at the same place. So it is truly customized based off of understanding what the needs are of the district. The data is important, the conversations are important, and then the planning is important. So we bring all that together, and then every school within the district may get something different based off of where their staff is and what the needs that they have helped to identify as the concerns in their district and in their schools.
Thank you. So what do you feel TPI could be doing better?
You know, when Dr. Bridges left, he left with a challenge of flexibility. I think in this model, if there's one thing that is not spelled out, is the flexibility. There's no additional flexibility that the flexibility is created by the schools and the work that we're doing. It's not set up. So if there were more flexibility, opportunities to have more flexibility in helping these schools to be able to move, I think that would be helpful.
Same thing. I would definitely say the flexibility piece, not just the copycat, but this work is engaging and intentional. All three of my schools are at three different places, but we've looked at trying to, adjust our schedule as a calendar to kind of meet the needs for the professional development. One thing with us being a three-school district, everybody operates in silos. You've got one math, one teacher, you got one science grade, eighth grade teacher. So being able to have the flexibility within our school calendar to be able to allow them to have that vertical and that horizontal alignment, because, teachers love the school building, but they don't want to be there at 7 o'clock every night. So us being able to change and move around and do different things with our calendar to be able to have those conversations. And then quite honestly, with some of our neighboring districts, being to have that flexibility to, let's go to a Hyde and partner with Steve down in, or go over to Dare or have the conversation with Washington, but just allowing us to have that flexibility. Yes, it's a little bit easier now with technology, but you and I both know sitting in a classroom, looking at products and talking and having that conversation, I think the biggest piece is that flexibility to make it happen.
What would you advise the assistant superintendent not to do? Feel relationship about it. What is that we should be cautious of to move forward this idea forward in this particular matter? You get my picture?
Yeah.
I've heard those good things.
Mhm.
But what is a leader that, hey, Wendell, you be careful now, when you go back.
Right.
And you start sharing this reform,
Mhm.
because I've been around long enough to know what reform
Mhm.
can,
Mhm.
cannot do. You know what I'm saying? Thank you.
One thing I,
Last, my
yeah,
question.
yeah, one thing I would say, Mr. Hall, is try not to do so much at one time.
Right.
Because there is a lot to do. Like Oliver was saying, with the schools, every school is different, and we have the pleasure of working with 36 schools in our school system with over 21,000 students. So every school is not different. I can leave one middle school here in the area of Pembroke and go to St. Paul's, and the atmosphere is completely different. The environment is completely different because the communities are completely different. We are a large mass rural county, so you can go from Maxton to Littlefield and take you about 45, 50 minutes driving if you speed a little bit, but about an hour and 15 minutes if you do the speed limit. But so just try to hone in, and I think that's what our team and our partners have done, is we honed in on areas that we knew that we could get the biggest bang for our buck at this given time. But if we have additional resources, then you can build out from there. Because like I said, K2, we know, is an area that we really want to focus at least for the next 2 to 3 years, is get more resources into those areas and then build on that. But I would say don't try to do so much at one given time.
Let me add this, not kind of answering the way you went. Dr. Robert made a comment about we added assistant principals at all of our schools. And being an ex-principal, I know I addressed the board that I don't know if you realize how valuable that is. Principal's going to be away from school. You can't get around it. They got to go to workshops. They got to do this. They got to do that. And when that principal's away from school, and I really don't care how small the school is, if you got 300 students, then you're having to get a teacher that's got to cover, got to do that administrative, got to do what's got to be done if you have a problem at that school. And having an assistant on that campus that can handle those things, even if you were there, but especially when you were away, to me, that is money very well spent. And I'm looking forward to seeing 3 years or the time period we got, what effect that will have on the schools in our county. Because we probably had 14 or 15 schools that did not have an assistant principal. Now, their enrollment might be fairly small, but still, I feel like as an ex-principal, you need that person there provide assistance if you are there, but especially when you are not there. And with the workshops we're doing, our principals are having to stay away quite a bit. So it's very valuable having that other person there that can handle those administrative duties.
Say thank you for your service. May you celebrate the 11th. Please, nice.
Thank you, sir.
Any additional questions?
I just need to ask this burning question about APs, assistant principals. Because it sounds like the assistant principal in this model naturally is going to expect it. So is there any kind of special training, workshops, courses that assistant principals need to have? Like I'm thinking about around the whole issue of school law. Do we need to focus more from the state level on getting these APs up to a different level of speed, given this model?
I'll jump in and I'll let Dr. Locklear fill in, because one of the things we're discussing is trying to free up our principal. We've had it. We're not at the point yet. As you look at the matrix, we only have one school that technically qualifies for a state funded position. And even with that, it wasn't a whole position. We were having to make up the other extra months of employment. But that's one of the things I think you have to do to be intentional around this work, because if we're going to say and be true about our principals being instructional leaders, we have to be able to free them up so they can get in the building. To the question of, yes, we're going to have to, as a state, to better prepare our assistant principals to be able to do the work, because at the end of the day, the other thing we're doing too is we're growing them to be our next group of principals. Right. And so, more support that we can give them in the AP role prepares them for running and allowing this, and they're still watching it, but it prepares them to be our next principals as well.
And one thing our superintendent allowed this year was for principals to actually make the recommendation on who their assistant principal is going to be. In the past, it's always been we would have a pool, we would interview, take the names, the superintendent would take those names to the board, and that's how assistant principals were identified. But now, as a principal and as a former principal, I would have loved to have selected the say so who my assistant principal was going to be. Because in the past, Johnny Smith would show up and I'm your AP. Oh, okay. I didn't know anything about Johnny Smith. Were we going to work well together? I hope so. But now principals have a voice and they can say, well, I want Olivia to be my assistant principal because based on her interview, she has received her master's in school administration. She's done all of these workshops in, like I said, school law, curriculum and instruction. She has a great background. So that's the person that I would want. And that's what principals were able to do this year. So those 14 that were hired all have their MSAs. They have extensive PD, and I mean, they were excellent candidates. So the pool that we have currently serving, we feel very good about. But just being able to have a say in who your AP is going to be, I think is going to really help.
I feel feel some type of way around Dr. Locklear's answer, because, as a small district, we looked around our district, we only have 2 individuals in Terrell County that have masters in school administration that are not in admin. So when you're talking about growing our own, and then we're competing with neighboring counties that have 15 to 12% signing bonuses. So soon as a position opens, they're across the Alligator River. So we have to find a way to be able to help smaller districts recruit and retain, not just principals, but APs and other employees, because we spend, 2 to 3 years training them. And soon as the weather change and another county with a bunch of sand has an opening, they're gone. And so we have to find a way across the state to be able to compete, to keep those individuals once we have them, to be able to hold them, because you're going to have that continuous cycle. And I know that's a bigger, talk than just the individual in this room, because that goes over to Jones Street, in my opinion. But we have to find a way to continue to be able to retain and recruit and keep our folks, right there.
I just saw the signal from Deanna, and so I just want to thank the panel and And all who contributed to this presentation. Chairman Davis, we turn it back over to you.
Thank you so much. Thank each of you as our partners. We're delighted to be in the same team with you on this education journey. And also our thanks to Drs. Martin, Edmonds, and Emery for leading this effort. Next, we have an opportunity to learn about national and state best practices around resource allocation. And we have with us Mr. Chad Alderman from Georgetown University.
I feel like I've got a tough fact to follow. We were just hearing from some inspiring district leaders, and now I'm going to elevate it quite a bit to talk about resource allocation and high-level school finance topics. Hopefully I can keep it fun and engaging. I have some graphs to show you, some data. Thanks for chuckling. As the introductory said, I'm Chad Alderman. I'm from the Edunomics Lab at Georgetown University. We are a research center at the university. We work on the intersection of education and finance. We train school district leaders, state board leaders, and other advocates to work with school finance and make sure the allocations are doing the best for students and also being used effectively, fairly, and efficiently, equitably. All right, so I'm going to start off with a poll. We like to get people engaged a little bit. So think about two schools that serve similar student populations, and they spend the same amount of money on the same things. Will they get the same results? Yes, give me a thumbs up. No, give me a thumbs down. All right, I see a lot of thumbs down. We'll talk about that in a little bit, but I just want to get you thinking. Here's another one. Think of a school you lead or know well and how it compares to other schools in the state with similar student demographics. How would you characterize your school relevant to its peers? Is it number one, high spending and high outcomes? Number two, high spending and low outcomes? Number three, low spending and low outcomes? Or number four, low spending and low outcomes? Show me a 1 to 4 on your hands if you want. All right, we got some of everything in the room. Let's see if we can talk about it. So the basic gist is that we have new data of how outcomes are by school. Obviously, with the pandemic, the data are not as good as we would have liked, but we can pair data with outcomes with spending. And I'm going to talk about some spending data that we have that's new to all schools across the country, and states have access to it now as well. I'm going to use a tool from Best NC. They're an advocacy group here in North Carolina. It's a tool that we've used something similar at the national level, but I thought for North Carolina data, it'd be nice to pull that numbers. You can also find it online. You can do some of the same exploring that I did for this presentation today. I'm going to talk about two different questions we might want to answer. Number one is, how equitably does a district allocate its funds? And number two, we're going to talk later, is how well is each school able to leverage its dollars to do the most for students? So to start doing the first question, you would want to select an individual district and examine which schools get how much money. This is a sample from Durham. This is from 2018-19, but it's real numbers. And each dot represents one school. I selected, these are elementary schools. And schools on the left get less money from the district. Schools on the right get more money. There's a wide distribution, as you can see. There's also a very difference even on the economically disadvantaged. The economically disadvantaged is the up and down axis. So I've highlighted two schools that are very similar in terms of economic disadvantage, but they get the same amount of money for how to spend on things like staff and other resources within the building. So how well is each school able to leverage its dollars? That's the second question we're going to talk about. Again, you can find a similar school. You can narrow your comparisons. You can look at a district. You can look at a specific school and look, say, at all elementary schools or all elementary schools at a certain poverty level, or all elementary schools by certain geographic regions, et cetera. So we're going to talk about the quadrants that I had you think about earlier. This is all North Carolina schools, elementary schools with more than 75% poverty rates. Again, each dot represents one school. Quadrant 1 is high spending and high outcomes. And for a school like that over there, you might think about, well, our outcomes are strong, but our costs are maybe not sustainable. Maybe we have low enrollments, which is driving up our per pupil expenditures. What trade-offs could we afford to make to maybe be more efficient, but still get the same outcomes? Could we expand our enrollment? Could we serve more kids and at a lower dollar per kid amount? For quadrant 2, you might want to think about things like we are beating the odds with the dollars we have, but how do we protect our school so that any changes preserve what's working in that school? Quadrant 3 is low spending and low outcomes. We might want to think about how can we ensure our school is funded fairly and equitably. It's not getting as much as other schools. In the meantime, what can we learn from peers who outperform us with similar dollar amounts, similar funds? And then the last is high spending and low outcomes. For a school like this, might want to say, how can we learn from our peers? How can we be using our funding differently? Can our staff work differently to better serve our students? Are we allocating our staff in the smartest way possible and getting the best bang for our dollar investments? All right, so these are just examples of what you can do. What I want to put in your ear today is how North Carolina might use this for what's called resource allocation reviews. So under federal law, the Every Student Succeeds Act of 2015 required every state to conduct resource allocation reviews. And in its application, its plan, North Carolina said it was going to do this annually. It was going to start in 2019. Obviously, things have changed since then, but it's still a good opportunity, a good moment to think about how you could embed some of these questions into the resource allocation reviews. So here's some true false questions you might want to think about as you design your resource allocation reviews. I apologize for some typos, so please forgive me on those. But so one is that, does the federal law prescribe a specific framework that every state must follow? The answer is no. Every state is left to decide how to do that. Does resources refer to federal funding only? The answer is no. It looks at all federal funds, all funds, state, local, and federal. Is a resource allocation review simply a conversation between the SEA, LEA, and school leaders about resource allocation and student outcomes? The answer there is yes, it is. It's a starting point, starting to put some of these numbers with outcomes and talking about how we got to where we got. For a resource allocation review, does the state have to specify reallocation? There, the answer is no. It's a conversation. It might lead to some decisions. It might not. And the last one is the goal of the resource allocation review is school improvement. At the end of the day, we want to make sure that we're using our funds the best we can to get the best outcomes for students. If you'd like, we have a protocol. It is useful for states or districts. I put it up here. It's on our website, the Edunomics Lab. You can see what that would look like. We are partnering with some states to figure out how to start implementing those. So I'd be happy to talk to anyone if they'd like to. Now I want to use a little bit more time to talk about the federal dollars, federal investment dollars that happened over the last years. In North Carolina, school districts got an average of about $3,300 per pupil to spend from the federal relief dollars. And I'm going to talk about some 6 mistakes that we're seeing districts potentially make. And we basically are putting this up here as, in a couple of years, once the money runs out, will we look back and say, where did the money go? Did we get anything good for kids? So there were few strings attached to the money. Districts had quite a bit of flexibility in how they allocated the money. This is a sample, a plot of a district, and the green represents the least economically disadvantaged. The red represents more economically disadvantaged. As you can see, there are some schools that are very high poverty, which aren't getting that much money. There are other schools that are more economically advantaged comparatively that are getting more dollars per pupil. Eventually, we will know how the federal dollars were distributed. The slightly less colored bars at the top represent the federal dollars. And in a few years, we'll start to see the federal dollars from the COVID relief dollars, where they're impacting, where they're being spent. So that will come out in a few years. Hindsight is 2020. We won't want to look back and say, well, the district spent all their relief money on X or Y. There was a big story in the Associated Press last month about districts using their money on upgrading their football fields. So there are other, I heard another story about a district wanting to use their federal relief funds to buy a plane. And the state said, no, you can't buy a plane. This happened to be a rural state, but it still wasn't a great use of money. So the district came back and said, well, can we buy a hangar to store our plane? And again, the state said, no, you can't do that. But the point is, there are lots of choices that districts have to make, and there's lots of money out there right now. We also really don't want headlines to say districts spent money on X or Y and students didn't gain. Students aren't improving at all. So here's 6 potential mistakes that might be made by states and districts. One is what we call a fiscal cliff. I'm going to talk about what a fiscal cliff is. So this is essentially, if you think of the blue line is in a normal year, here's the trend line for how revenues were coming in. There was a threat at one point that state budgets wouldn't be very good, and so they were down, and the federal dollars would help fill that gap. Turns out that actually didn't happen, so the graph isn't perfect. But what happens after that money runs out is what we call a fiscal cliff. So if districts are using their monies in ways that create long-term obligations, they could create a cliff where they have to make layoffs or very painful cuts in a very few short years' time. Furloughs, layoffs, or stagnant pay could all happen. So a couple of things to be watching out for are recurring labor costs. So a lot of investments in new full-time staff. If those people are not short-term employees, if they're given full-time employment, but they're tied to federal funds, when the federal funds run out, what happens to those employees? Anything about base pay raises or increased benefits that, again, might incur long-term fiscal obligations for short-term money. Some potential strategies to deal with that, some things on stipends. We want to get labor. We want to have people work with kids. And so we want people in our schools, but stipends might be one way to do that, or contracts or other one-time bonuses around those. All right, we had a superintendent up here talk about enrollment declines in their district, but we also wouldn't want a district to just use their federal funds to offset any enrollment declines. If it's a long-term problem, you wouldn't want to use temporary funds to solve it. Nationally, we had about 3% fewer public school students last year. We haven't seen the numbers yet for this year, but they don't show signs of a quick rebound. North Carolina was also down about 3%, varies by district, of course. There's also been a COVID baby bust. So there were thoughts at one point that people would stay home and have more babies last year. That didn't happen. We had a baby bust. So there were actually fewer births, and it's a long-term trend. We've been having fewer births for a long time in this country, but last year was even particularly lower. You also wouldn't want a headline like this, that the district used half of their federal money to pay off or essentially offset any enrollment loss. This may or may not pertain to everybody in the room, but problematic contracts. So if you're doing something right now that you wouldn't want in the news, be careful about that. We've heard someone call it procurement palooza, basically using the money and spending it on new contracts that otherwise wouldn't be considered. We have an example from Maryland. They wrote a $1.3 million a year contract with a 1-year-old company. It was a 10-year contract to lease electric buses. So it's a big dollar amount and is a pretty untested company and may work, may not. We'll see. Number 4 that we see is deploying funds inequitably across schools. We've already talked about that money. We will be able to measure that at some point in time. We will be able to see where the money went. But if students struggle disproportionately in some schools or certain types of students, we want to spend the money on those students who need the most help. So this is a quick poll. I should have numbered these 1, 2, and 3, but if a district was thinking about adding learning time, potentially by adding staff, how should they pay them? Number 1 could be a fixed dollar amount, say a flat dollar amount for every person who takes on a summer role or things like that. Using your current salary, so everyone gets a certain percentage bonus or something else. Think about this one for a second. All right, so the risk here is that salaries are disproportionately inequitable in some schools and some districts. And so if a district is doing percentage-based raises, they will inevitably give more raises and more money to the wealthiest quartile of school and potentially exacerbate any existing equities. They'll use the federal dollars to essentially double down any equities they have already. So this is sort of a tension. I've talked about a fiscal cliff. We want to be cognizant of long-term financial obligations, but we also want to make sure the community sees and values the investments. Sometimes that is more people, sometimes that might be other things, but we want to make sure that they see what's going on. Otherwise, the community will look at it and say, they got all this money, where did it go? A principal might say, who knows how they spent it? All I know is we didn't get any. So they don't see how it goes. They might not see it. And oftentimes we talk about per pupil expenditures, and the principal has very little control over it sometimes. If it's mostly staff or salaries that they don't get to choose, they don't see how it's spent. A teacher may say they always spend it in central office and then blame the teachers for it. Or a parent might say, I'm not sure if the money really made a difference, or my kid didn't get anything from it. And ultimately, this is the last risk, is investing without demonstrating real results for students, thinking about how that is. We did a lot of baseball metaphors this summer, and the risk is taking the eye off their ball. So if we're not continually focusing on how to turn the dollars into investments for students, we might take our eye off the ball in the long run. All right, I will stop there. Happy to take questions. I will make one pitch that my organization runs a certificate program. We train school district leaders and state budget managers for folks who are interested. We're doing a cohort this fall. We also do others. We'll probably do others in the spring. So feel free to reach out to us about that as well. All right, I'll pause for questions. Yeah, go ahead. Yeah, we are doing that. It is tricky. I think one thing is that, to my first question, which was, can schools spend the same amount and still get different outcomes? And it's hard to pin down exactly what a school is doing or a district is doing. I think you heard some of the superintendents here earlier. They're pursuing strategies they might have tried earlier with other leaders, but something clicks. Maybe there's new management or new personnel that they're able to work with. And so there's not always a secret sauce or secret formula that I have at this point, where researchers are trying to dig into that as much as they can.
was low spending high. Attention given to trying to spread it out across the board. That's kind of hard to.
You're saying focus spending on quadrant 3, basically? Or which one are you thinking about?
I was quadrant 1.
Quadrant 1.
I was looking at that. Could be 3, but I just think the more you focus on your spending, the higher your outcomes is going to be. You aren't spreading yourself so thin across the spectrum.
Yeah, I totally agree with that in terms of being able to put in dollar terms, thinking about return on investment in education. We don't think about that very much. It's a sort of an econometrics type idea, but I do think it matters in terms of how we leverage our resources.
Let me be clear. I don't mean not put the dollars in there either.
Yeah, me neither.
If you don't have them.
I can't remember what that stood for. I'd have to look it up, but you can find it on the Best NC tool. Has different things. You can slice it by charter schools. You can exclude charter schools if you'd prefer, all those types of things. Yeah, back there.
Process right now, not only on the state budget, but also kind of from a department's perspective, looking at a legislative agenda moving forward. Have you seen any other states who've kind of made partnerships with their general assemblies or their legislatures saying, we know that there's an infusion of federal funding here that could be used potentially as pilots, and we're going to build out some kind of partnership so that you can continue those moving forward? Just some type of conversation at the state level. Have you seen any models like that?
Well, a couple of things. One, so 90% of the money goes to districts, and the districts have discretion about how they spend it. But that still leaves 10% for the state, and the state also has quite a bit of discretion on how they can spend it. And some of the best examples I've seen from the state level are using the federal dollars as an on-ramp to something you might want to do anyway. So in North Carolina, you do a lot on advanced teacher roles. And so if there are ways to use that to incentivize more districts to take those up, that could be one thing. If there's other strategies you'd like to pursue, I see it as an on-ramp. So something that you can use to accelerate a trend or trajectory you would like to do anyway. Any question here?
Implementation from your knowledge base. Let's say a school district is implementing over 5 years some model. Theoretically, should the cost of implementation decline over time? Or is that just nothing but theory hype?
It depends on what it is. With using the stimulus money, it will expire. And so I think it would benefit to think about how to front load some costs. So we'll use the example of advanced teacher roles, thinking about some planning for upfront identification, something about professional development for new master or mentor teachers, training people on how to work as teams that can be front loaded and then over time ease down so you can continue the same program on operating costs. That doesn't happen in everything, but there might be different ways to use the federal dollars in that sort of way. Yeah. It is, yeah. Yes, you can, yeah. finding those within your district or within the state, talking to them, what are they doing?
And how do you define outcomes?
So this is using the school performance score. Again, it's a couple years old now, but you could do similar graphs like this using any preferred outcomes. So whether that's graduation rates or percentage of students taking AP or IB courses, et cetera.
And the cost will vary.
Yeah. Thought I saw a question. Yeah, go ahead.
What's going to bring real results, then part of my strategy should be to pilot and test and run as many different things as possible, which in fact might mean that I'm not necessarily investing in things that show real results.
That's a fair criticism. And what I would say is that districts need to evaluate how their attempts are succeeding or not. And then, ideally, in an ideal world, we'd use the federal dollars to try new things, some proven, some less proven, and then experiment and figure out which ones are working and which ones are not. And then go from there, which ones are worth replicating and expanding with ongoing base dollars as well.
And sorry, my question might be a little self-serving, because this is exactly what we're doing, right? It's like, is we are investing.
Set me
in
up to deliver
strategies
to you.
that we
There's
think-
an easy.
Right, but the idea is that we're investing in things that we think will show promise. We call them promising practices as opposed to best practices.
Yep.
And then we have a team that's working across the agency to go out into districts and identify these practices so that we can share them across contexts. But I think to do just that. So I just worry a little bit about the language around like not necessarily investing in things that might not show real promise, because we could limit the potential then. So.
Yeah, that's totally fair. I mean, what we're trying to get at with this one is that focusing students at the heart of it. And if it's things like long-term bond obligations or, yeah. Yep. So one thing I'd follow up on that is that I've seen districts and states investing some of their federal dollars into things like improving data systems. I haven't seen them take the next step to say, we're going to explicitly carve out a portion of the money to do evaluation work. So if you're trying something that you would like to develop, and I see you smiling, so maybe this is right along your thinking, but I would love to see more of that type of thinking of carving out how it's going to.
Recommendations around how to spend the state reserve. We asked for a significant amount of funding to do research and evaluation on programs. Now, whether or not the General Assembly appropriates that money that way is a completely different story. But yeah, I mean, investing in good research and evaluation is critical to figuring out whether or not these things work.
Yep. Yeah, go ahead.
Interesting thing about the graph is that it's not disaggregated for those schools which might be in large urban districts versus those that are in our smaller low wealth districts across the state. And it leaves out the partnership with community. And so while you might have an allocation for $75,000 into schools that have the same poverty level, but when that school is in a large urban area that has lots of other resources around it, it has a better chance of making strategies work. So it would be interesting to see which of those are in our lookalike counties and that have had lots of other resources. Doesn't speak specifically to strategy, but
To Superintendent Pruitt's point, you can slice the data, I believe, by type of district and definitely within a district. So you could narrow this just to focus on a specific district. We found that the per pupil spending isn't always higher or lower in rural areas. It definitely varies on the setting and sort of the plant that they have and how many people they have in their community and the schools that they're using to fill. And so these are per pupil, so that it does hinge a lot on enrollments and the match between enrollment versus the district expenditures. Any other questions or comments? All right, well, I'll be around if anyone wants to grab me later. Thanks for the time and good luck, everyone.
Thank you, Mr. Alderman. Appreciate
Thank
your
you.
presentation and your insights. Let's take a 10-minute break. Be back a little after 3:15.
yeah, my neighbors and just